Before we begin, subscribe for more chilling stories and tell me which city you're watching from. I'd love to know. The Woman Who Called from the Window. Arthur Hayes, a man of quiet habits and unwavering logic, lived a life meticulously ordered within the quaint confines of Willow Creek. His home, a sturdy two-story colonial, stood nestled amongst ancient oaks, its windows reflecting the predictable rhythm of suburban life. He was a creature of routine, his days unfolding with the precision of a well-oiled clock, his nights spent in the undisturbed embrace of a deep, dreamless sleep. Arthur believed in the tangible, the observable. The world to him was a place of measurable facts and rational explanations. He found solace in the predictable, the comforting hum of his appliances, the familiar creak of the floorboards, the gentle sigh of the wind through the tall pines that bordered his property. This steadfast belief, however, was about to be profoundly, terrifyingly challenged, shattered by an intrusion that defied every principle he held dear. One particularly still night, as the moon cast long, skeletal shadows across his bedroom floor, Arthur was wrenched from his slumber not by a sudden noise, but by a profound, inexplicable sensation. It was a whisper, not of sound, but of pure intent, resonating directly within the confines of his mind. His name, Arthur, was breathed into his consciousness, soft yet impossibly insistent, emanating from somewhere beyond the walls of his house, from the deep, shadowed expanse of his backyard. He lay rigid, his heart hammering against his ribs, his breath catching in his throat. He tried to dismiss it, to attribute it to a dream, a trick of a mind still lingering on the edges of sleep. But the call persisted, growing more distinct, more alluring, weaving itself into the very fabric of his waking thoughts. It tugged at him, a subtle, magnetic pull, a silken thread drawing him towards the unknown. Fighting a growing sense of dread, yet unable to resist the insidious compulsion, Arthur slowly, deliberately, swung his legs over the side of the bed. The air in the room felt heavy, thick with the sudden, unearthly chill that had nothing to do with the night outside. His bare feet met the cold wooden floor, the abrupt contact a stark reminder of his physical reality. Yet his mind felt detached, distant, focused solely on the insistent summons. He moved through the silent house, each step echoing unnaturally loud in the profound stillness, towards the kitchen, towards the source of the inexplicable call. He found himself standing before the large kitchen window, its glass a dark, reflective mirror to his own fear-stricken face. He peered into the inky blackness beyond, his breath fogging the pane. A faint, almost imperceptible silhouette materialized by the far fence line, just at the edge of his property, partially obscured by the ancient, gnarled oak tree that stood sentinel there. It was the undeniable shape of a woman, her form indistinct, a shimmering distortion against the backdrop of the deeper shadows. She stood utterly motionless, her presence a profound, unnerving stillness within the restless night. Her voice, no longer an internal whisper, but an external, ethereal melody, drifted through the closed window, sweet and melodious, yet unnervingly persistent. It knew he was awake. It spoke his name, Arthur, a soft caress that simultaneously soothed and terrified him. It began to whisper fragmented phrases, words that carried the weight of forgotten promises, ancient pacts, things that stirred an unsettling resonance deep within him, memories that were not his own, yet felt chillingly familiar. "Do you remember the vow?" she murmured, her voice a low, hypnotic hum. "The old agreement? It is time." An overwhelming, almost irresistible impulse seized Arthur. He felt a powerful need to open the window, to let her in, to step out into the cold night and greet her. His hand, as if guided by an unseen force, reached for the cold metal of the latch, his fingers brushing against its metallic surface, the chill a jolt to his system. He paused, his body rigid, suspended between the hypnotic lure and a primal, deep-seated instinct for survival. His rational mind, though battered and bruised by the inexplicable, screamed a silent protest. He gripped the cold metal of the latch, his knuckles white, unable to move, unable to turn away. He was trapped, utterly immobile between the siren call of the spectral woman and the terrifying realization of the profound danger that lay just beyond the pain. He felt a subtle, almost imperceptible pressure against the glass, as if she were leaning closer, her form pressing against the unseen barrier, her breath a ghost of cold on the other side. The air outside grew colder still, a palpable wave of icy dread seeping through the glass, enveloping him, threatening to pull him into the ancient, silent darkness she represented. The spectral voice intensified, a symphony of seductive whispers, urging him, commanding him to yield. Then, abruptly, without warning, it cut off. The profound silence that followed was deafening, a sharp contrast to the insidious murmur that had filled the night. The silhouette, without any discernible movement, simply vanished, dissipating into the deep shadows as if she had never been there at all. Only the gentle, persistent hum of the refrigerator broke the oppressive stillness, a mundane sound that suddenly seemed profoundly comforting. The frigid cold that had emanated from the backyard receded, but the lingering sensation of the call, the ghost of her sweet, insidious voice, remained etched in Arthur's mind, a chilling echo that resonated in the deepest chambers of his consciousness. Arthur stumbled back from the window, his legs unsteady beneath him, his mind a chaotic maelstrom of terror and disbelief. He retreated to his bedroom, the once familiar space now feeling alien, vulnerable. He spent the rest of the night huddled in his armchair, not daring to close his eyes, his mind racing, desperately trying to comprehend the inexplicable, to find a rational explanation for the impossible event. He questioned his sanity, his memory, every fiber of his being, trying to grasp at any logical straw that might explain away the phantom caller. He recalled forgotten local legends, hushed whispers of the Lady of the Lake or the Whispering Woman from the old folktales of Willow Creek, dismissing them as mere superstitions. Yet the memory of the sweet, insistent voice, the chilling silhouette, was too real, too visceral to simply ignore. His world, once so predictable, had been irrevocably shattered, revealing a terrifying, unseen dimension that lurked just beneath the surface of his carefully constructed reality. The days that followed were marked by a pervasive, suffocating unease. Arthur felt perpetually watched, a prickling sensation on the back of his neck, as if unseen eyes constantly scrutinized his every move. He heard phantom whispers, faint echoes of his name carried on the wind, just beyond the reach of conscious hearing. Every unexpected creak of the old house, every rustle of leaves outside his window sent a jolt of terror through him, leaving him jumpy, his nerves raw and exposed. The house, once his sanctuary, now felt porous, vulnerable, its walls offering no protection against the malevolent presence he instinctively knew still lingered. He began to scrutinize his past, searching for any promises or old things that might connect to the spectral caller, descending into a spiral of paranoia, convinced that some forgotten transgression, some unknown debt was finally being called to account. Sleep became a luxury he could no longer afford. He began to sleep with the lights on, a silent terror gripping him, his mind unable to escape the chilling memory, the profound sense of an impending, inevitable return. The calls did not immediately return in the same way, but the silence was heavy, expectant, pregnant with unseen horrors. He heard faint echoes of his name in the sigh of the wind, saw fleeting, indistinct shadows in the periphery of his vision, always just beyond his direct gaze. He became obsessed with the kitchen window, avoiding it for hours, then drawn to it by an irresistible, morbid curiosity, checking it obsessively, convinced that she might return, might stand there again, a silent, dark sentinel in the pre-dawn gloom. He felt a growing isolation, unable to speak of his experience to anyone, fearing he would be deemed mad, his sanity questioned, his fears dismissed. The calling sensation, the pervasive feeling of an unseen presence, never fully left him. It settled deep within him, a chilling reminder of the night the woman called, and the door she had almost compelled him to open. He felt perpetually on edge, caught in a cycle of dread and anticipation, forever listening, forever waiting, for the sweet, insidious whisper of his name to echo from the dark expanse of his backyard once more. The incident had left an indelible mark, irrevocably altering his perception of reality. He was no longer the man of routine, but a man haunted, forever listening, forever changed, a prisoner of his own fractured peace. The spectral caller might be gone for now, but the knowledge of her existence and the profound vulnerability it exposed had left him forever altered, forever a captive to the chilling echoes of that unforgettable night. The silence in Evelyn Hayes' home had been a fragile truce. After weeks of unsettling disturbances, a deceptive calm had settled over their quiet suburban street in Oakhaven. The mysterious notes, the phantom intercom calls, the chilling presence of the black car, all had seemingly ceased, leaving behind a lingering, pervasive unease that clung to the air like a persistent mist. Evelyn, however, found no true peace. Her sleep was a fractured landscape of shadows and whispers. The fear had burrowed deep, eroding her sense of security, transforming her once comforting home into a place of constant vigilance. She often found herself drawn to the living room window in the deepest hours of the night, a silent sentinel watching the deserted street, her gaze fixed on the corner where the disturbing notes had so often appeared. Her husband, Michael, though outwardly pragmatic, carried his own silent burden of worry, often waking with a start, reaching for her hand in the dark. One particularly still night, a profound stillness descended, heavier than usual. It was 3 a.m., that witching hour when the world seemed to hold its breath. Evelyn, restless and unable to sleep, was sitting by the window, a blanket pulled tight around her shoulders. The only sounds were the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant, mournful cry of an owl. Then, a low, almost imperceptible rumble broke the quiet. A car. Its engine purred with a muted menace, a sound that sent a jolt of ice through Evelyn's veins. It was the black car. It moved slowly, deliberately, its headlights extinguished, a predatory shadow gliding through the darkness. It pulled to a silent stop at the very corner of their property, precisely where the malicious offerings had been found before, its dark form merging with the deeper shadows cast by the old oak tree. The engine remained on, a low throbbing pulse in the oppressive quiet, a heartbeat of unseen malevolence. Two figures emerged from the car, their movements fluid and practiced. A man, tall and gaunt, and a woman, slender, her hair pulled back tightly, a stark silhouette against the backdrop of the night. They did not speak. Their heads swiveled slowly, methodically, their gazes sweeping the street, checking, searching, ensuring no witnesses were present in the profound solitude of the early morning. They moved with an unnerving grace, a synchronized dance of sinister intent, their forms barely visible in the faint ambient light from a distant streetlight. Evelyn pressed herself against the window frame, her heart hammering against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the suffocating silence, terrified they would somehow sense her presence, her terrified gaze. She held her breath, every muscle in her body tensed, her mind screaming in silent protest at the horrifying tableau unfolding before her. The man walked to the rear of the car, his movements deliberate, unhurried. He opened the trunk with a soft click that seemed impossibly loud in the stillness. From within, he retrieved something wrapped in a dark cloth, a bundle of unknown, menacing contents. It was not large, but its very presence radiated a palpable, chilling energy. The woman waited, her posture rigid, her eyes still scanning the silent street, a silent sentinel guarding the malevolent act. The man carried the wrapped object with a careful, almost reverent solemnity. Together, they walked towards the small flower bed at the edge of Evelyn's garden, just beyond the gate. They knelt, their movements like a macabre ritual, and carefully placed the bundled item deep within the earth, concealing it beneath the fresh soil and the wilting autumn leaves. The act was quick, precise, a practiced desecration performed under the cloak of deepest night. Having completed their task, the man and woman arose, brushing dirt from their dark clothing. They cast one last, lingering look at the house, a silent, chilling gaze that seemed to penetrate the walls, finding Evelyn in her hidden vigil. Then, with the same quiet deliberation, they returned to the black car. The engine, still humming its low, menacing throb, eased away from the curb. The car moved slowly, gliding down the street without its headlights, a phantom vessel, disappearing into the inky blackness from which it had come. Evelyn watched until the last faint echo of its engine faded into the profound silence, leaving her alone with a cold dread that had now solidified into a terrifying certainty. She did not dare move, did not dare breathe, until the first faint hint of dawn began to paint the eastern sky, promising the return of light, and with it, the courage to confront the horror left at her doorstep. The lingering sense of something acrid and strange, carried on the faintest breeze, seemed to seep through the closed window, a bitter promise of the malevolence that awaited her in the morning lights.
The first tendrils of dawn stretched across the sky, painting the world in hues of muted gray and hesitant pink. Evelyn's terror slowly receded, replaced by a cold, resolute determination. She roused Michael, her voice a strained whisper, her eyes wide with the chilling details of what she had witnessed. Together, their faces grim and set, they ventured outside, towards the corner of their garden, towards the freshly disturbed patch of earth. The air still held a faint, cloying scent, a mix of damp soil and something else, something metallic and faintly sweet, like forgotten spices mixed with stale smoke. Their hearts pounded in unison as they cautiously approached the site. There, nestled amongst the wilting marigolds, was the offering. A simple ceramic plate held a mound of coarse, yellowish meal mixed with vibrant red chili peppers, their pungent aroma now distinct in the morning air. Beside it lay a short, spent candle, its wick blackened, and an unlit, half-smoked cigar, its tip stained and ominous. Beneath these items, pressed into the damp earth, was a small, waterlogged piece of paper. With trembling fingers, Evelyn carefully unfolded it. Her full name, Evelyn Hayes, was scrawled in thick black charcoal, the same jagged, unmistakable hand from the previous notes. The message was clear, undeniable, a brutal testament to the insidious malice that had haunted their home for weeks. This was not a prank. This was a deliberate act of dark, ritualistic intent, a chilling working left directly at their gate, an undeniable violation of their peace. Reverend Miller, his face etched with concern, arrived swiftly, his presence a beacon of quiet strength in their terror-stricken home. He listened to their shaken account, his gaze sweeping the now visible contents of the offering with solemnity. He knelt by the garden bed, his hands gloved, and offered a fervent prayer,
his voice a low, resonant hum against the morning quiet. Then, he carefully, methodically lifted the plate, its contents still intact, and deliberately shattered it against the stone, the ceramic fragments scattering across the soil. He produced a pouch of coarse salt, scattering it generously over the remnants of the offering, a purifying gesture against the lingering malevolence. His eyes, fixed on Evelyn, held a stark warning. For a time, he instructed, his voice grave, do not speak your name aloud. Do not allow it to be spoken. Sever the connection they seek to establish. Break their hold. From that morning onward, as if a malevolent switch had been flicked off, the direct attacks ceased. No more chilling notes appeared at the gate. The black car did not return, its silent menace fading into the shadows from which it had emerged. The incessant, disembodied rings of the intercom at 3 a.m. were no more. Slowly, tentatively, a semblance of peace began to return to the Hayes home. The air, once heavy with dread, lightened almost imperceptibly. Evelyn and Michael started to sleep more soundly, the oppressive weight of constant vigilance gradually lifting. Yet, the memory of that terrifying dawn, the image of the man and woman by the black car, the gruesome offering in their garden, remained etched in their minds, an indelible scar. Evelyn found herself still glancing towards the corner of their property, a lingering unease, a permanent resident in her psyche, a constant reminder of the darkness that had once threatened to consume them. The house, while outwardly calm, held a quiet, watchful stillness, forever marked by the sinister visitation of the car at 3 a.m., a testament to the chilling reality that some evils, once confronted, may recede, but never truly disappear. They simply wait, patiently in the shadows, for another opportune moment to strike, their malevolence undiminished, their intent unchanged.
The Whispering Woods of Oakhaven. Ethan Thorne arrived in Oakhaven under a bruised sky, the Appalachians pressing in on the narrow road. A wildlife biologist, he sought the preserve's pristine wilderness, eager to catalog its secrets. The air, crisp with pine and damp earth, offered a welcome calm after years in city laboratories. He anticipated days tracking deer and identifying flora, documenting the natural rhythms of an untouched ecosystem. Oakhaven itself seemed suspended in time, its few inhabitants moving with a quiet slowness, their gazes lingering on newcomers with an unnerving intensity. It was a place where old legends took root, whispered by firelight, where the forest held secrets far older than any human memory. He rented an isolated cabin on the preserve's edge, a place smelling perpetually of damp earth and ancient wood. Its floorboards groaned softly underfoot. The silence was profound, broken only by rustling leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. This was his refuge, where nature reigned supreme and scientific observation could thrive. He unpacked his journals, field guides, and equipment, a sense of purpose settling deep within him. His first weeks established a precise rhythm of mapping trails and setting camera traps. He noted with mild scientific interest the unusual abundance of crows. Their sleek black forms dotted the forest canopy, perched on power lines and abandoned homesteads. They seemed more numerous here than anywhere he had worked, their cause a constant, if sometimes unnerving, backdrop to his fieldwork. He often found them gathered in large, silent congregations in clearings, hundreds of them, their obsidian eyes fixed on some unseen point. A profound stillness emanated from their massed ranks, a quietude that felt heavy, unnatural. They would sit, completely motionless for hours, then suddenly, without warning, erupt into flight as a single cohesive dark cloud. He initially dismissed it as a local anomaly. Then, the nights began to change. a subtle shift in the nocturnal symphony, a discord he couldn't quite place, pricked at his subconscious. It started as a faint murmur, a low, almost subliminal hum beneath the natural sounds of the forest, nearly imperceptible. He would wake, disturbed, a prickle of unease on his skin, straining to hear it again. Only the familiar chirps of crickets and the gentle sigh of wind met him. He attributed it to exhaustion, his mind playing tricks in the overwhelming quiet. But the feeling of being watched, of something unseen just beyond his perception lingered, a growing shadow, whispering of unsettling truths. The murmurs grew. They coalesced into a sound undeniably vocal, yet utterly inhuman, seeping into the cabin walls. It began around midnight, a low, guttural chant from the forest's deepest, most ancient parts, weaving through the trees like a tangible mist. It was a chorus, not of human voices, nor known animals, but of something far older, far wilder, born from the wood's raw essence. He realized, with a jolt of chilling recognition, that the sound came from the crows. Not individual cause, but a synchronized, sustained melody, a haunting, undulating song that rose and fell with ritualistic cadence, tearing at the edges of his sanity. The sound was too complex, too deliberate, too organized for birds. He lay rigid with fear, listening to the impossible singing, a terrifying orchestra of feathered darkness. It seemed to pull at the night's fabric, drawing him towards unknown dread, a creeping inevitability tightening its grip. The melody was not uniform, containing distinct movements, as if a conductor guided them, shifting from a mournful dirge to an aggressive shriek, then back to a hypnotic drone. The unease deepened nightly, eroding his scientific skepticism, replacing it with certainty that something profoundly unnatural unfolded. His nights became sleepless vigils, punctuated by the impossible song. His days were a struggle against doubt and mounting terror. The forest was alive with a malevolent presence, a force beyond his comprehension, calling to him through the voices of the crows, a siren song of the wild. One evening, unable to bear the corrosive unease, he made a decision. He would investigate. Armed with a powerful flashlight, a compass, and clinging desperately to scientific skepticism, he ventured into the forest as the first notes of the chorus drifted through twilight. The air grew heavy, thick with damp earth and something acrid, metallic, like ozone or stale blood. The crow song pulsed around him, louder now, a physical presence vibrating in his chest and echoing in his bones. Each note was a deliberate, hypnotic rhythm pulling him deeper. He saw them then, hundreds, perhaps thousands, perched on every branch, every moss-covered stone. Their forms were dark and ominous against the fading light, their eyes dull, unblinking, glassy orbs, lost in a profound, unsettling trance. They swayed almost imperceptibly, their bodies twitching in time with the impossible melody. It was a grotesque, beautiful spectacle, terrifying in its unnaturalness, a living testament to something deeply wrong within the forest. He pushed deeper, following the hypnotic sound, his skepticism crumbling, replaced by undeniable horror. The ground beneath his feet became slick with an unknown, viscous moisture, oddly warm. An overwhelming cold seeped into his bones, a chill unrelated to the night air, an intrinsic coldness, speaking of ancient, malevolent power, guiding him to an inevitable confrontation. He moved through the suffocating darkness, branches clawing at him, the crow song a relentless, maddening pulse. Closer now, a chorus of despair and absolute control. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the oppressive quiet. As he finally broke through the dense foliage,
the impossible clearing revealing itself before him.
An unnaturally perfect clearing, ringed by trees that leaned away from its center. A gnarled oak stood in its heart, ancient branches twisting like skeletal fingers, devoid of leaves, its bark scarred with unimaginable age. Around the tree's base, crude, spiraling symbols glowing faintly with a sickly green light cast an eerie pallor. There, beneath the oak, stood a figure. Tall and gaunt, draped in shadows, a part of the night itself. The man was unmoving, his back to Ethan, arms raised slightly, hands open, fingers splayed, as if conducting a monstrous orchestra. The crawl song swelled, reaching a fever pitch, a sharp, piercing shriek tearing through the night, a symphony of torment and absolute obedience. It burrowed into Ethan's core, echoing his deepest fears. Cold dread clamped his heart, stealing his breath, his every instinct screaming to flee. This was the Whisperer, Oakhaven's legend come to life, not as a quaint myth, but as a chilling, undeniable, terrifying reality, a living conduit of primal power. The man turned slowly, with the deliberate, unhurried grace of something ancient and unburdened by time. Ethan gasped, a choked sound lost in the crow's cacophony, stepping back into deeper shadows, desperate to remain unseen. The Whisperer's face was a mask of ancient wrinkles, his eyes sunken and impossibly old, yet burning with unnatural intensity, a light not human. There was no malevolence, only a deep, unsettling connection to the wild, a knowing that transcended human understanding, a silent claim over the forest. He exuded a profound, chilling indifference. He began to sing, a low, resonant hum, both beautiful and terrifying. The melody vibrated in the air, settling into Ethan's core. It was a song not meant for human ears, a song that commanded, that bent the will of the forest creatures to its silent bidding, a melody of absolute control. As he sang, the crows responded, their chorus shifting, becoming deeper, more harmonious, a sound resonating from the forest's very soul. Ethan felt a powerful, invisible force pulling at him, a desire to step forward, to join the communion, to surrender to the hypnotic rhythm, to shed his humanity and become part of the ancient wild. He fought it, his mind screaming, his body rigid with terror, every muscle tensed against the insidious lure. He knew with absolute certainty that if he yielded, if he stepped into the light, he would be lost forever. Another instrument in the Whisperer's horrifying symphony, his will extinguished. He watched frozen, a prisoner of fear, as the man concluded his song with a subtle, dismissive gesture. The crows, in one sudden, coordinated movement, took flight, soaring into the night sky, their eerie melody fading, leaving only echoing silence. The clearing was plunged into unnerving quiet, broken only by Ethan's frantic heart. Ethan fled, crashing blindly through the undergrowth, heedless of branches or roots. He didn't stop until he burst, gasping into his cabin, slamming the door shut, fumbling frantically for the lock. He spent the rest of the night huddled in a corner, clutching his knees, every creak, every rustle a potential return of the shadowy conductor. He tried to rationalize it, to find a scientific explanation, but his mind kept returning to the impossible song, the entranced crows, the glowing symbols, and the man whose voice commanded the forest. His scientific framework had shattered into irreparable pieces. The next morning, under a deceptively bright sun, he revisited the clearing. The circular indentation remained, a scar on the earth, but the symbols were gone. The gnarled oak stood silent. No trace of the Whisperer remained. It was as if the encounter had been a terrifying dream. Yet a profound, irreversible change had taken root within Ethan. The forest, once scientific wonder,
now felt charged with an unseen presence, a pervasive dread clinging to him. He no longer heard the crow song, but a new, suffocating silence had descended, heavier, more expectant, pregnant with unseen horrors. The crows were still there, always watching him, their black eyes glinting, a knowing, ancient gaze following his every movement. He tried to continue his work, but his focus was shattered, his resolve eroded. Every shadow seemed to hold a fleeting form. Every whisper of wind carried a fragment of that impossible melody echoing in his mind. He started seeing the whisperer in his peripheral vision, a fleeting glimpse among the trees, gone the moment he turned his head, a phantom woven into his paranoia. Paranoia clawed at his mind, eroding his logic, dismantling his sanity. He began to believe the crows watched him, reporting his movements, waiting for the next impossible song. The scientific man, the rational biologist, was gone, replaced by a terrified, haunted shell, a prisoner of his unraveling mind. Oakhaven had claimed another soul, not with overt violence, but with a silent, insidious horror that twisted the mind until it became indistinguishable from the wild madness of the woods itself. The whispers of Oakhaven's ancient secrets had found their way into his mind, singing a song from which there was no escape, a melody of eternal dread. The forest had become his prison, the crows his wardens, and the whisperer his silent, omnipresent master.
Thomas Miller was a man forged from granite, his spirit as unyielding as the Appalachian foothills surrounding his home in Willow Creek. A devout man, his faith was an impenetrable shield against the world's perceived follies, especially anything he deemed supernatural. To him, such tales were mere superstitions, shadows cast by weak minds. His solace, his quiet joy, lay in the delicate flutter of wings and the sweet melodies of his beloved finches. He kept a pair of vibrant scarlet-chested finches, their plumage a splash of living fire against the muted tones of his sunroom. They were more than pets. They were a symbol of companionship, their inseparable bond a testament to nature's perfect harmony. Thomas cherished them, their gentle chirps a soothing counterpoint to the quiet solitude of his life. He often spoke of them as a singular entity, the little couple, and the thought of separating them was anathema. He'd meticulously cared for them, ensuring their cage was always spotless, their food bowls brimming and their water sparkling. Their tiny, vibrant lives filled his home with a warmth that even his steadfast faith couldn't entirely provide. His peace, however, was soon to be disturbed by Silas Croft, his enigmatic neighbor. Silas lived in an old, run-down house at the edge of the woods, a place perpetually shrouded in shadow, even on the brightest days. He was a gaunt, reclusive figure, his eyes holding a depth that seemed to gaze not at, but through those he encountered. He moved with a quiet, almost predatory grace, his presence often announced by an unsettling stillness in the air. For weeks, Silas had been making increasingly persistent inquiries about Thomas's finches. He would stand at the property line, his gaze fixed on the sunroom, a strange, possessive gleam in his eyes. He wasn't interested in buying the pair, only one. Specifically the male, the brighter, more vocal of the two. Thomas, with his customary politeness, had always refused, explaining that he couldn't separate the pair. But Silas was relentless, his soft-spoken requests masking an unyielding determination. His voice was a low rasp, carrying an undercurrent of something unsettling, a quiet menace that Thomas, in his unwavering rationality, chose to ignore. The repeated visits became a ritual, Silas always returning, always asking, always fixated on the male finch.
One blustery afternoon, after a particularly draining exchange where Silas had all but demanded the bird, Thomas, weary from the incessant pressure, made a decision he would forever regret. He believed he was simply ending an annoyance, placating an eccentric neighbor. He still refused to separate the pair, explaining once more, with a sigh of exasperation, his deep-seated conviction. But Silas, with a chillingly persuasive glint in his eye, argued that perhaps one bird could find a new, equally loving home, suggesting it was almost cruel to deny the creature another chance at happiness. Thomas, against his better judgment, against the silent pleading of his own heart, against the tiny, vibrant pulse of fear that pricked at the edges of his calm, finally relented. He sold Silas the male finch, watching with a heavy heart as Silas carried the small cage away, a strange, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his thin lips. The air immediately grew heavy, the chirping stillness in the sunroom now profound, unnerving. A palpable void had opened in the space where the male finch had once sung, leaving only the lone female. Her usual vibrant song, now a series of mournful, hesitant chirps. The silence was not just the absence of sound, but a living, breathing entity, a cold blanket draped over the house. The following morning, Thomas awoke with a fever that clawed at his bones, a sudden, incapacitating illness that struck him down with the force of an unseen blow. His body was racked with chills, his muscles screamed in protest with every movement, and a persistent, nauseating sickness kept him hunched over a basin. It was a fever unlike any he had ever experienced, a profound weakness that seemed to drain not just his physical strength, but his very essence, his vitality. He felt as if something vital, something intrinsically him, had been wrenched away. Days blurred into a haze of suffering, his once robust frame wasting away, his eyes sunken and vacant. His son, David, and daughter-in-law, Sarah, watched in growing horror as Thomas, the indomitable patriarch, withered before their eyes. They administered every remedy they knew, from old family concoctions to modern medications, but nothing touched the relentless grip of the sickness. Prayers, fervent and desperate, were offered, but they seemed to bounce off an invisible wall, powerless against the insidious decline. The doctors were baffled, attributing his condition to a rare, aggressive virus, yet their treatments offered no solace, no relief, only a deepening sense of helplessness. As Thomas continued to fade, a distant cousin visiting from out of town cast a wary eye towards Silas Croft's shadowy house. Over a hushed cup of coffee, the cousin, Martha, spoke of old whispers, of Silas's family history, of unusual dealings and unusual practices, of a reputation for dabbling in things best left untouched. She spoke of workings, of shadowcrafts, and curses, terms that grated against David's rational mind, but sparked a chilling unease in Sarah's heart. The words hung heavy in the air, transforming the mysterious illness into something far more sinister, far more ancient than any virus. Thomas, in his moments of fleeting lucidity, seemed haunted, his eyes scanning the room as if searching for an invisible tormentor, whispering fragmented words about a missing song, a broken connection. His unshakable faith, once a beacon, now seemed besieged, his once firm grasp on reality loosening with each passing, agonizing day. The quiet dread that had settled upon the Miller household deepened into a palpable fear, a chilling realization that they were battling not just an illness, but something far more malevolent, a darkness summoned from the shadowed corners of Willow Creek.
Driven by desperation and the growing suspicion that something beyond medical science was at play, David and Sarah sought the counsel of Reverend Elias Thorne, the steadfast pastor of the First Baptist Church of Willow Creek. Reverend Thorne was a man of quiet conviction, his spiritual strength emanating from him like a palpable aura. He listened with a solemn, unblinking gaze as David recounted Thomas's sudden, inexplicable decline, his voice faltering as he spoke of Martha's unsettling whispers. When they mentioned the incident with Silas Croft and the Finch, a shadow crossed the Reverend's face. He agreed to visit Thomas immediately, his usual gentle demeanor now tinged with a resolute gravity. Upon entering Thomas's darkened room, a palpable chill descended. Reverend Thorne knelt by the bedside, his hand gently resting on Thomas's feverish brow. He closed his eyes, his lips moving in a silent prayer, and then, his voice a low, somber tone, he confirmed their worst fears. "There was a darkness here," he declared, his gaze sweeping the room. "A thing made against this house, against Thomas, a bargain that must be undone." Thomas, roused by the pastor's presence, recounted in a weak, fragmented whisper the story of Silas's relentless pursuit of the Finch and his reluctant agreement to sell it. The lone female finch in the sunroom, once vibrant, now sat huddled and silent, her feathers dull, her tiny eyes dim, a mirror to Thomas's own fading life. Reverend Thorne listened intently, his expression grave. He looked at David and Sarah, his eyes holding a stark warning. The connection was severed, a deliberate act of malice. You must return what was taken. The bargain must be undone. As they discussed how to approach Silas, a soft knock echoed through the quiet house. It was Silas Croft, his presence as unnerving as always. He feigned concern, his voice a low, oily murmur, offering assistance, and suggesting that perhaps the remaining finch, the female, also needed a new home. His eyes, however, betrayed his true intent. They gleamed with a predatory hunger, an insatiable desire to complete his sinister collection, to extinguish the last flicker of life and hope in Thomas's home. He insisted that if he took the second bird, everything would settle, a chilling proposition that sent shivers down Sarah's spine. David, fueled by the Reverend's warning, refused point blank, his voice shaking with a righteous anger he barely suppressed. Days later, the horrifying discovery was made. As David worked in the garden, a faint, metallic scent led him to a freshly disturbed patch of earth near the property line, close to Silas's side. Buried shallowly beneath the soil, wrapped in a tattered piece of black cloth, was a crude offering. A small, wooden effigy, crudely carved, lay nestled among melted candle wax, clumps of coarse human hair, and a scattering of vibrant, scarlet-chested finch feathers, unmistakably from Thomas's bird. Twisted around the effigy were dried herbs and a few rusted nails, forming a grotesque, unmistakable symbol of malevolent intent. It was a dispatch, a dark ritual made manifest, designed to bind and inflict suffering. David felt a cold dread clamp around his heart, a primal fear that transcended his scientific understanding. This was the proof, the undeniable evidence of the evil that had invaded their lives. Reverend Thorne returned, his expression now one of fierce determination. He systematically moved through the house, anointing every doorway and window with blessed oil, his booming prayers echoing through the silent rooms, demanding the departure of the encroaching darkness. He returned to Thomas's bedside, a picture of spiritual warfare, his voice strong and clear. "Silas Croft, you will return what you have stolen. You will undo this wickedness and ask for forgiveness."
Armed with David's terrifying discovery, the Reverend, accompanied by a resolute David, confronted Silas. Silas, faced with the undeniable evidence and the Reverend's unshakable resolve, visibly recoiled, his face contorting into a mask of pure, seething fury. With a guttural growl of protest, he stalked to his house, returning moments later with the small cage, reluctantly placing it on Thomas's porch. He offered no apology, only a venomous glare that promised retribution, a silent curse held within his unnervingly still eyes. The male finch, once so vibrant, was now lethargic, its feathers ruffled and dull, a shadow of its former self, yet undeniably alive. From that moment, as if a switch had been flipped, Thomas began a slow, miraculous recovery. The fever broke, the chill subsided, and the agonizing weakness gradually receded. His appetite returned, and with each passing day, a flicker of his old strength reignited. The male finch, reunited with its mate, slowly regained its vibrancy, their combined song a symbol of restored balance. No one in Willow Creek ever spoke of the incident again, not openly, but a silent understanding settled over the town. Everyone knew the true nature of Silas's obsession with the bird, the malicious intent behind his insistence. The Millers had been touched by a darkness they could barely comprehend, a harrowing encounter that left an indelible scar, a chilling reminder that some evils lurked just beneath the surface of their quiet lives, waiting for an opportunity to strike, their malevolence disguised as simple desire. Thomas, forever changed, no longer dismissed the unseen. His faith, though tested, now held a deeper, more profound understanding of the shadows that truly existed in the world. Shadows that were not just metaphors, but tangible, malicious forces. The whisper of the second bird, a chilling echo, forever reminded him of the curse narrowly averted and the enduring darkness that resided in the heart of Willow Creek.
The hex that followed Julia and her family. Julia Evans lived a life woven into the quiet fabric of Maplewood, a serene suburban town nestled on the outskirts of Boston. Her days revolved around the comforting rhythm of family, her husband, Robert, a steadfast pillar of practicality, and their son, Roddy, still at home, a vibrant echo of their youth. Their eldest, Monique, had long since embarked on her own married life, a source of pride and occasional wistfulness for Julia. Their home, a charming colonial with a neatly manicured lawn, was a sanctuary, a place of laughter and routine, untouched by the insidious shadows that lurked just beyond the periphery of everyday perception. Julia, a woman of simple pleasures and deep affections, cherished this normalcy, a shield against the uncertainties of the world. Her routine was a comforting balm, a predictable cycle of market runs, gardening, and the quiet domesticity that filled her hours. She believed in the tangible, the observable, the world that presented itself without hidden agendas or malevolent undercurrents. This belief, however, was about to be profoundly, terrifyingly challenged. It began subtly, an unsettling disruption in her familiar world. One crisp autumn morning, as she stepped out to retrieve the newspaper, her eyes caught an anomaly on the curb. A small, haphazard mound of dirt adorned with 3 flickering candles, a half-empty bottle of cheap whiskey, and a crumpled note bearing her name in a spidery, unfamiliar script. The word warning was scrawled beneath it, a stark, unsettling declaration. She felt a prickle of unease, a cold sensation that had nothing to do with the morning air, but her inherent practicality dismissed it as a prank, a juvenile act of mischief. With a dismissive kick, she scattered the items, their fleeting presence and inconvenience, nothing more. The next morning, however, as she walked Roddy to the school bus stop, another offering appeared near the intersection. This time, a small clay dish held a mound of coarse salt and a miniature rusted blade, its tip pointing directly towards her house. Her breath hitched.
The childish prank had acquired a sharper, more deliberate edge, a creeping sense of malice that whispered of something far more sinister. A genuine fear, cold and sharp, coiled in her stomach. The following day, her neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, a woman known for her keen observation and even keener gossip, approached Julia with a hushed, conspiratorial air. "Julia," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I saw someone. Early this morning, just before dawn, a small woman all bundled up, leaving things by your gate. She was whispering your name, I think." Mrs. Henderson's words, though laced with neighborly concern, painted a vivid, chilling picture, confirming Julia's burgeoning dread. The anonymous axe now had a face, a human agent, but the motive remained shrouded in an unsettling mystery. The fear solidified into a chilling certainty. The outside world, with its strange offerings and whispered curses, was beginning to press in, threatening to breach the sanctity of her home. The whispers, once confined to Mrs. Henderson's porch, seemed to echo in the quiet corners of Julia's mind, a constant, low hum of dread that seeped into her waking hours and haunted her restless sleep. The intrusions escalated, no longer confined to the street. The quiet sanctuary of her home began to twist, to subtly betray her trust. Late at night, when the house settled into its deepest silence, disembodied footsteps echoed from the empty upstairs hallway, heavy and deliberate, a phantom presence pacing above their sleeping forms. Glasses, sitting precariously on the kitchen counter, would inexplicably crash to the tiled floor, shattering into countless pieces, their sharp reports slicing through the quiet night. A faint, cloying scent of extinguished candles, thick and cloying, would inexplicably fill her bedroom even with all windows sealed, clinging to her clothes and bedding like a malevolent perfume. Then came the notes, not outside now, but inside, slipped through the narrow gap of her bedroom window, appearing as if by unseen hands. They were scrawled on cheap, yellowed paper, the words jagged and menacing. "Your marriage will crumble," one declared, its ink bleeding slightly as if with malevolent intent. Another, far more insidious, simply stated, "Sickness will claim you." Robert, ever the pragmatist, tried to dismiss them, attributing them to vandals, to her own frayed nerves. He attempted to rationalize, to explain away the inexplicable, yet even he would wake in the dead of night, drenched in a cold sweat, his breath catching in his throat, a silent terror gripping his usually steady heart. The house, once a haven, was slowly becoming a cage, its walls whispering threats, its shadows concealing an unseen architect of their torment. The line between reality and nightmare blurred, and Julia felt herself slipping into a profound, suffocating paranoia. The torment reached a terrifying crescendo one sweltering afternoon when Julia returned from the market. Her heart pounded in her chest, a frantic drum against her ribs as she approached her gate. It was tightly bound with a vibrant scarlet ribbon, intricately knotted and emblazoned with her name, Julia, scrawled in thick black charcoal. Nestled near the entryway, a clay plate sat like a gruesome altar, overflowing with fiery red chili peppers, a small, dark vial of cheap whiskey, and a crumpled piece of cloth. Tangled within the fabric were strands of hair, dark and fine, undeniably her own. The sight pierced her composure, shattering the fragile defenses she had desperately constructed. Tears streamed down her face, hot and stinging, a torrent of fear and desperation she could no longer contain. This was no longer a series of unsettling incidents. It was a targeted assault, an invasion of her most sacred space, a declaration of war. Her knees buckled, and she sank to the ground, sobbing uncontrollably, the grocery bags scattering around her. Her resolve crumbled, replaced by an overwhelming primal terror. This was a force she could not fight alone. Through her tears, she called Reverend Peterson, their kindly pastor, his voice a steadying balm in her storm of panic. He arrived swiftly, accompanied by Martha, a devout sister from their church, her eyes filled with compassion and understanding. The Reverend, a man of unwavering faith, surveyed the scene with a grave expression. He confirmed her worst fears, his voice low and firm. "This," he declared, his gaze sweeping over the malevolent offerings, "is a working, designed with a clear intent to destroy. Do not touch it." With practiced movements, he carefully collected the items, placing them in a metal bin. He then performed a solemn cleansing, burning the disturbing objects, their noxious smoke curling into the afternoon sky like a dark prayer. Afterward, he moved through the entire house, anointing each doorway, each window frame, each corner with blessed oil, his voice rising in fervent prayer, invoking protection, casting out the darkness encroaching. A fragile peace settled over the house, a deceptive calm after the storm, leaving Julia and Robert with a sense of precarious relief. For several weeks, the house seemed to exhale, a palpable quiet descending. The phantom footsteps ceased, the glasses remained unbroken, and the scent of extinguished candles vanished. Julia dared to breathe again, to hope that the ordeal was truly over, that the Reverend's intervention had severed the malevolent connection. But the silence was a cruel trick, a period of deceptive calm before the next, more insidious wave of attack. The phone calls began, always from an unknown number, always a woman's voice, low and chilling, devoid of emotion, a monotone whisper that spoke of intimate knowledge and chilling threats. "Your past is catching up," she would murmur, her words like icy needles pricking at Julia's forgotten anxieties. "Your children will suffer." She would then chillingly recite Monique's name, then Roddy's, her voice lingering on each syllable, as if savoring the fear she instilled. "I know what you keep hidden. I know where they sleep." The calls were sporadic, unpredictable, appearing at odd hours, disrupting their night, poisoning their days, eroding their hard-won peace. The sense of being watched, of being known by an unseen tormentor, became unbearable. The terror was no longer confined to physical manifestations. It had burrowed into their minds, a psychological siege that left them constantly on edge, their nerves frayed, their sense of security utterly shattered. Robert, his skepticism finally vanquished by the relentless onslaught, looked at Julia with the haunted, desperate plea in his eyes. The relentless psychological warfare and the chilling intimacy of the threats forced their hand. The decision was agonizing, yet undeniable. They had to leave Maplewood, to sever all ties with the home that had become a battlefield. Their beloved house, once a symbol of stability, was now tainted, a monument to their fear. Before the moving trucks arrived, a final horrifying discovery awaited them. As Robert carefully removed the window boxes from Julia's bedroom, preparing them for transport, his shovel struck something hard beneath the soil of the flower bed. Buried deep beneath layers of earth and roots was a small, dark glass bottle, corked and sealed with wax. Inside, a chilling tableau. A cluster of rusted pins, a viscous, sickly sweet honey, strands of dark hair, again, undeniably Julia's, and a folded slip of paper. Unfurling it with trembling hands, they saw Julia's name scrawled across it, followed by a single damning word: sickness. It was the ultimate working, a concentrated malevolent curse aimed directly at Julia's life force, unearthed just in time. Reverend Peterson, called once more, arrived with a solemn resolve. He took the bottle, his gaze unwavering, and shattered it against a stone, its contents spilling onto the earth, rendered inert, its power broken. He then led them in a final fervent prayer, his voice ringing with the authority of his faith. "The cycle is ended," he declared, his voice filled with certainty. "The darkness is cast out." The family moved, leaving behind the charming colonial, the quiet streets, and the insidious evil that had sought to consume them. They built a new life in a different town, a place untainted by the malevolent whispers of their past. But Julia never forgot. The memory of the strange offerings at her gate, the insidious creep of the malevolence from outside to within, how it had almost taken root in the very heart of her home, remained etched in her soul. A chilling, indelible reminder that some shadows once invited are incredibly difficult to banish, and that true terror can begin with the smallest, most unassuming whisper. She carried the quiet understanding that evil was not always a grand, dramatic spectacle, but often a slow, persistent erosion, a creeping darkness that begins at the periphery and relentlessly works its way inward, threatening to consume everything.
Peter and the House That Called. The autumn air in Blackwood carried a profound chill, a crisp, almost biting reminder of summer's fading warmth. Peter, my friend, and I were making our way home, the familiar suburban street cast in the amber glow of the old gaslit streetlights. Our conversation had flowed easily, a comfortable rhythm of shared anecdotes and the easy laughter that comes with the long-standing bond. We passed the old Willowbrook Manor, a derelict, decaying structure that had stood empty for decades, its dark, shuttered windows like vacant, predatory eyes staring out at the world. It was a local landmark, a forgotten relic of a bygone era, usually passed without a second thought, relegated to the background noise of the neighborhood. But tonight, a palpable shift occurred. Peter stopped abruptly, mid-sentence, his laughter dying on his lips, extinguished as if by an unseen hand. He stood perfectly still, his head tilted slightly to the side, his gaze fixed with an unnerving intensity on the dilapidated facade of the manor. The cheerful light in his eyes, usually so vibrant, dimmed, replaced by a vacant, unsettling stare, as if he were seeing something far beyond the grimy, broken window panes, something that only he could perceive, an image burned into his very retina. His posture stiffened, his shoulders drawing inwards, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift that spoke of an unseen burden, a sudden, crushing weight pressing down upon him. He looked lost, profoundly disoriented, a stranger in his own skin, utterly detached from our shared reality. "He's there," Peter murmured, his voice a low, hollow whisper that seemed to echo from a great distance, devoid of its usual warmth, its familiar inflection. It was not his voice. It was something else, something flat and resonant, like a stone dropped into a deep well. His eyes, usually bright with curiosity and a quick intelligence, were now clouded, unfocused, fixed solely on the dark, gaping maw of the house, a black hole in the fabric of the twilight. "He needs me. I have to go to him, now." Without another word, without a glance in my direction, he began to walk slowly at first, his steps hesitant, then with an accelerating, relentless pace, his body moving with a strange, almost unnatural determination towards the ancient, rusted wrought iron gate that guarded the manor's overgrown, weed-choked path. A cold dread, sharp and sudden, seized me, clamping around my heart. This was not Peter. The man walking beside me was a puppet, his strings pulled by an invisible hand, his will usurped by an unknown, malevolent force, his identity stripped away, leaving only the shell responsive to a dark command.
I reached out, my hand closing around his arm, my fingers digging into the thick fabric of his jacket, trying desperately to pull him back, to break the insidious spell that seemed to hold him captive, to drag him back to the safety of our shared world. He resisted with surprising, unyielding strength, his body rigid and unbending, his head still bowed, as if in silent obeisance to an unseen master, a spectral figure only he could hear. His eyes remained fixed on the ground directly in front of him, but his feet continued their relentless march towards the house, a grim, determined shuffle that defied my desperate tugging. The sheer force of his resistance was profoundly unsettling, an unfamiliar power pitted against my own frantic attempts to tether him to reality, to the present moment. It was as if he no longer recognized my presence, my voice, my desperate pleas. His gaze was empty, his mind elsewhere, caught in an inescapable snare. A profound, unsettling trance had settled over him, twisting his once familiar features into a mask of eerie serenity, a calm that spoke of utter surrender. He seemed to float, rather than walk, his movements imbued with an unnatural grace, an almost weightless quality that amplified the strangeness of the situation. The air around us grew heavy, thick, with a sudden inexplicable stillness that pressed in on my chest. The leaves on the ancient oak across the street, usually rustling gently in the evening breeze, now thrashed and writhed violently without any discernible wind, a silent, frantic dance of unseen, agitated forces. A faint, cloying scent of burnt wax, acrid and metallic, seeped into the air, clinging to our clothes, pressing in on us from all directions. It was the undeniable smell of rituals, of old offerings, of something ancient and malevolent awakened, stirred from a long, slumbering darkness, its presence now palpable and suffocating. As we reached the tarnished, crumbling gates, standing directly in front of the skeletal facade of Willowbrook Manor, a low, guttural groan emanated from the house itself, a sound of ancient wood creaking in agony. The heavy oak front door, warped and splintered with age, slowly, painstakingly, swung inward, its rusted hinges protesting with a long, drawn-out shriek that sent shivers down my spine. It opened just enough, a narrow sliver of profound darkness, revealed a gaping, becoming void, precisely wide enough for a single person to slip through. Peter gasped, a sharp, choked intake of breath, and without another word, without a glance in my direction, he took a decisive step forward, his foot already crossing the threshold, disappearing into the abysmal gloom beyond. My heart leapt into my throat, a suffocating fear seizing me, paralyzing me for a split second before primal instinct took over. With a desperate, adrenaline-fueled surge, I lunged, grabbing Peter by the arm, my fingers digging into the thick fabric of his jacket, all my remaining strength. I pulled with all my might, a primal scream caught in my throat, yanking him back from the precipice, from the encroaching darkness that threatened to swallow him whole, to consume him utterly and irrevocably. He stumbled violently, disoriented and reeling, as if rudely awakened from a deep, unsettling dream. A string of curses, uncharacteristic and raw, tumbled from his lips, his eyes wide and unfocused, struggling to grasp his surroundings. Then as suddenly as it had erupted, the anger dissolved, replaced by a profound, heart-wrenching sob that tore at my own composure. He crumpled, falling to his knees on the damp pavement, clutching his head in his hands, his body racked with tremors, his shoulders shaking with a mixture of terror and confusion. I don't remember, he choked out between gasps, his voice now weak, vulnerable, undeniably his own, full of a raw, desperate fear. I had to go in, a voice, a man's voice. It kept saying, come now. His fragmented words hung in the chilling air, a terrifying testament to the unseen forces that had almost claimed him, almost stolen him away forever. We left the street, our pace frantic, Peter leaning heavily on me, his steps unsteady, as if he were relearning how to walk, how to exist in the real world, his mind struggling to reconnect with his body. He looked back once, over his shoulder, a flicker of profound, unspeakable dread in his eyes at the gaping maw of the manor, now cloaked once more in impenetrable, suffocating darkness, its secrets still waiting, still watching.
The night that followed was a blur of hushed conversations and whispered, desperate prayers. We reached my home, a sanctuary against the encroaching dread of the street, a place where the shadows of Willowbrook Manor could not easily follow. Peter was pale, trembling, his composure utterly shattered, his usual robust confidence replaced by a fragile, almost childlike vulnerability. He recounted his fragmented memories, his voice raspy with lingering fear, the words struggling to form coherent sentences. The authoritative command, the inescapable magnetic pull, the sensation of an invisible tether drawing him relentlessly into the shadowy heart of the abandoned house. I listened, my own heart a cold, hard knot of terror, as he described the visceral, undeniable urge to obey, to surrender to the unseen caller, to give himself over to a darkness he could not comprehend. We spent hours in a quiet vigil, the oppressive weight of what had almost happened pressing down on us, a silent, suffocating presence in the room. The logical explanations, the rational dismissals, all crumbled to dust in the face of Peter's undeniable, terrifying experience. A sense of profound vulnerability settled over us, an awareness of forces far older and more sinister than we could possibly comprehend. Forces that preyed on the human will and left only empty shells behind. Finally, exhaustion claimed him. Peter fell into a deep, troubled sleep, a heavy, dream-laden slumber that seemed to drag him into a darker, more volatile realm, a place where the manor's secrets continued their silent work. He woke the next morning with a choked cry, his eyes wide and haunted, a cold sweat clinging to his skin despite the cool morning air. He recounted a dream, vivid and chilling, that had plagued his sleep, a nightmare that felt more like a memory. He stood, paralyzed, in the cavernous, dust-choked living room of Willowbrook Manor, the air thick with the scent of decay and forgotten lives. Before him, silhouetted against a tall, arched window, stood a man. Impossibly tall, his form seemed to absorb all light, a void in the gloomy room, a figure composed purely of shadow. He had no face, only a featureless expanse where his eyes and mouth should have been, a terrifying blankness that conveyed an ancient, malevolent power, a presence that transcended human understanding. The man in the dream simply stood there, unmoving, watching, waiting, his presence a suffocating, crushing weight that stole Peter's breath. Peter felt the same inescapable pull, the same silent, absolute command in his dream as he had felt on the street, a chilling echo of the night before, amplifying the terror. The faceless man, though utterly silent, radiated an absolute, unyielding authority, a demand that resonated in the deepest, most vulnerable parts of Peter's subconscious, a silent promise of eternal captivity within the manor's desolate, decaying walls, a fate worse than death itself. The dream, stark and undeniable, solidified our resolve. We carefully, meticulously avoided Elmwood Street, choosing a longer, circuitous route to reach our daily destinations, a silent, unspoken agreement to never speak of Willowbrook Manor again, not even in whispers. The name itself felt cursed, a word too heavy with unspoken horrors, too charged with malevolent energy. Peter, though physically recovered from the immediate trauma, was irrevocably changed, his spirit bearing an invisible scar. A shadow lingered in his eyes, a flicker of deep-seated fear that never truly left him, a constant reminder of the darkness he had almost embraced. His once vibrant personality was now tinged with a quiet melancholy, a subtle caution in his demeanor, a wariness that touched every interaction. He became more reserved, more introspective, constantly glancing over his shoulder, his senses perpetually alert to unseen threats,
to the possibility of the call returning. He started avoiding crowded places, preferring the quiet solitude of his own home, the familiar comfort of his routines, clinging to them as a fragile shield against the creeping suspicion that the unseen forces of Willowbrook Manor still watched him, still sought to claim him, their patience inexhaustible, their desire unyielding. The events of that terrifying night became an unspoken pact between us, a shared trauma too profound to articulate, too terrifying to revisit, a secret we both carried with the weight of a heavy stone. We understood, without words, that some things are best left undisturbed, some doors best left closed, some questions best left unanswered, lest their revelations shatter the fragile piece of our reality. The spectral house, with its dark, vacant windows, continued its silent vigil over the neighborhood, a constant, ominous presence, a dark heart beating at the edge of Blackwood, waiting. And sometimes, in the dead of night, when the wind howled through the eaves and shadows danced on the walls, I swore I could still smell it, the faint, acrid scent of burnt wax, carried on the cold wind, a chilling reminder of the night Peter almost stepped into the waiting darkness, almost answered the insidious call of the faceless man who lurked within Willowbrook Manor. The house continued to hum with a quiet, ancient power, a silent, enduring summons, waiting patiently for its next unwitting visitor, its next victim, to finally answer its inescapable, malevolent beckoning, to forever join its ghostly inhabitants.
Mysterious messages at the gate. Sarah Jenkins cherished the quiet normalcy of her life in Crestwood, a tree-lined suburb where days unfolded with predictable calm. Her husband, John, was a steady anchor, and their two children, Lily and Tom, filled their home with the comforting sounds of youth. The house, a classic brick colonial, stood as a testament to their stability, a haven against the unpredictable currents of the outside world. Sarah thrived on routine, on the small, comforting rituals of grocery runs, garden upkeep, and the reassuring chatter of neighbors over fences. Her perception of the world was grounded in the tangible, the rational, a belief system about to be severely tested by an insidious darkness. It began subtly, a ripple in the placid surface of their suburban peace. One brisk Tuesday morning, as Sarah collected the morning paper, her gaze snagged on a small, folded piece of paper tucked precisely beneath a loose brick in the gatepost. Her name, Sarah, was scrawled across it in a jagged, unfamiliar hand, accompanied by the chillingly vague phrase, "You know what you did." A cold unease trickled down her spine, a sensation she quickly dismissed as a childish prank, a misguided attempt at mischief. She crumpled the note, tossing it into the recycling bin, her mind already moving on to the day's tasks. But the next day, another appeared. This one, slightly larger, read, "It is done. Today again." The unsettling familiarity of the handwriting, identical to the previous note, sent a shiver through her. This was no random act. A deliberate, malevolent presence had turned its attention to her, to her family, a creeping shadow beginning to fall over their once sunny home. John, ever the pragmatist, tried to soothe her fears, suggesting it was likely a disgruntled former acquaintance or a prank that had gone too far. Yet the persistent chill in the air around their gate, even on warm days, told a different story. The messages escalated, their content becoming unnervingly specific, tearing at the fabric of Sarah's composure. A week later, a note was found pinned to their front door with a rusted nail, its message more audacious, more personal. It contained her full name, Sarah Jenkins, followed by the names of her children, Lily and Tom, and then a sequence of numbers, 10, 27, at 0245. A date, a time. The implication hung heavy in the air, a sinister promise of an impending, unknown event. That very night,
Precisely at 2:45 a.m., the shrill, insistent ring of their intercom ripped them from their sleep. John stumbled out of bed, fumbling with the receiver, his voice hoarse with sleep. Silence met him. He called out, "Hello? Who's there?" No answer. Only the faint, almost imperceptible sound of static, then a click as the line went dead. The pattern repeated for several nights, the disembodied ring a torment, a psychological weapon wielded by an unseen hand, stripping them of their sleep and their peace. The unnerving incidents began to spill beyond the confines of their property, invading their perception of the neighborhood as a safe, predictable space. Mrs. Albright, their elderly neighbor, a woman with eyes that missed nothing, stopped Sarah during her morning walk. Her voice was hushed, laced with a tremor of fear. "Sarah, dear, I've seen it. A dark car, black, with its lights off. It creeps around the block late at night, sometimes just idling by your house." Her eyes widened slightly, a glint of genuine terror in their depths. "And there's a woman, always in the passenger seat, hair pulled back tight. She just watches." The neighbor's words painted a chilling picture, confirming Sarah's burgeoning paranoia. It wasn't just random acts. They were being observed, stalked. The unseen hand now had a vehicle, a shadowy operative, its presence a tangible threat. The once comforting familiarity of their street now felt tainted, transformed into a surveillance zone. Every shadow a potential hiding place, every passing car a possible harbinger of dread. One evening, as twilight deepened into an oppressive gloom, John, arriving home late from work, unlatched the gate. A gasp caught in his throat. Tied to the inside of the wrought iron, almost hidden from plain sight, was a small, crudely fashioned cloth pouch. His fingers, trembling, untied the knot. Inside, nestled among dry earth, were several rusted pins and what looked unmistakably like tiny, brittle chicken bones. A folded piece of yellowed paper accompanied the gruesome contents. With a growing sense of dread, he unfolded it. Scrawled in the same distinctive, jagged hand was a single, chilling sentence: "The debt will be paid." He felt a cold, metallic taste in his mouth, a sudden surge of primal fear that left him breathless. This was no longer a game, no longer a prank. This was a deliberate, tangible act of malevolence, a dark ritual brought directly to their doorstep, a profound violation of their home's sanctity. He showed it to Sarah, his face pale and drawn, his eyes mirroring her own mounting terror. The silent, unsettling dread had finally found a physical form, a horrifying testament to the sinister forces arrayed against them, forces that seemed to draw closer with each passing day, tightening their grip, demanding an unseen reckoning.
The discovery of the ominous pouch plunged Sarah and John into a deeper abyss of fear. Their attempts to rationalize, to find secular explanations, had utterly failed. The threats had escalated beyond simple words, manifesting as tangible, unsettling objects. Dark rituals performed right outside their home. Desperate, Sarah confided in Eleanor Vance, a quiet, spiritually grounded woman from their church. Eleanor listened patiently, her expression solemn, her eyes filled with a profound understanding that transcended mere sympathy. "This is not simply mischief, dear," Eleanor stated softly, her voice carrying a quiet authority. "This is a deliberate spiritual attack, a working aimed at your family." She advised Sarah to acquire consecrated oil and to anoint the gate and the entire perimeter of their property, to create a spiritual barrier, a shield against the encroaching darkness. "Bless your home," Eleanor urged, "and ask for divine protection. Speak against this evil." That very evening, with trembling hands, Sarah and John followed Eleanor's instructions.
John poured a thin stream of consecrated olive oil along the sidewalk leading to their gate, tracing the intricate patterns of the wrought iron, his lips moving in a whispered prayer. Sarah anointed the gateposts, the mailbox, even the tires of their cars, envisioning an invisible shield of protection descending upon their property, a barrier against the malevolent forces that sought to breach their sanctuary. For a few blessed days, a fragile peace settled over the Jenkins household. The menacing notes ceased to appear. The intercom remained silent during the darkest hours of the night. The black car that had haunted their street was nowhere to be seen. Sarah dared to breathe again, to hope that the ordeal was truly over, that Eleanor's counsel and their prayers had driven back the encroaching shadows. The brief respite, however, was a cruel deception, a period of false calm designed to lull them into a dangerous complacency, only to strike with renewed, intensified malice. The silence was shattered during a fierce rain-lashed night. The wind howled like a banshee through the eaves, and the incessant drumming of rain against the windows created a desolate, unnerving symphony. In the morning light, as the storm finally abated, John stepped out to retrieve the soaked newspaper. His gaze fell upon the gate, now adorned with another note. This one, unlike the previous ones, was not merely tucked or pinned, it was tied to the wrought iron with a piece of rough twine, its paper thick and waterlogged, the familiar jagged script bleeding slightly from the moisture. The words, however, were stark and chillingly unambiguous. Last chance, beg forgiveness or pay. The message was a brutal escalation, a direct threat, a chilling ultimatum that left no room for misinterpretation. It transformed the unsettling incidents into a terrifying, inescapable confrontation, a demand for retribution that felt deeply personal, utterly relentless. The note was a visceral blow, shattering their fragile sense of security. The psychological toll became unbearable. Sarah found herself constantly on edge, her nerves frayed, her sleep haunted by fragmented images of the black car and the faceless woman. Every shadow seemed to hold a lurking presence. Every unexpected sound sent a jolt of terror through her. Lily and Tom, though shielded from the full extent of the threats, sensed their parents' profound unease, their youthful laughter growing subdued, their eyes mirroring the unspoken fear that permeated the house. The once comforting walls of their home now felt like a cage, its windows offering only glimpses of a world that had become hostile, unpredictable. The sense of being watched was constant, suffocating. Sarah began to feel the weight of an unseen gaze on her back even within the supposed safety of her living room. The neighborhood, once a haven of suburban tranquility, was now a battleground, its familiar streets transformed into a hunting ground for a relentless, unseen stalker. The messages, the calls, the dark offerings all painted a horrifying picture of a vengeful entity demanding an unknown debt, relentlessly pursuing them, its patience seemingly limitless, its malice boundless. The final note was not just a threat, it was a promise of an impending, terrifying climax, a reckoning from which there seemed no escape, a relentless pursuit that threatened to unravel their very lives. The debt, whatever it was, had to be paid.
Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more terrifying stories.